Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Sega Genesis game, and that happens to be Gain Ground. And this version of the game was developed by Sega, and it was published by Renovations, and it was released in 1991 in all regions. Now this is not the original version of the game, because originally this was an arcade game released in 1988. And then there was a Master System version, but that one only came out in the PAL region. And then there was a PC Engine CD version, but that one's only in Japan. And lastly, there was a remake for the PS2, but it was a part of a collection called Sega Ages. So this happens to be an action strategy game with a top-down view. And I never heard about this game until I watched a stream from Kit171. And this was one of the games that he played on there, and I never heard of it before, and it actually looked really interesting to me, so I really wanted to give it a go myself. So I figured I'd also give you a bit of a shout out. So now let's finally take a look at the game, and first things first, let's take a look at the story. Now there's barely any story within this game, but for what I've gathered, the federal government have created a computer system to allow them to develop a gain ground simulator. But the computer system went nuts and decided to take a whole bunch of citizens as hostages. So they're all stuck inside the simulation, so now they have to send a whole bunch of people to rescue them, and that's literally about it. Now, it may not be the most amazing thing ever, but I do kinda like the idea of a computer system fucking shit up though. So now let's move on to the gameplay. So it's in a top-down view, like I said before, and you have different characters to use, but if you're playing on normal mode, you only start with 3 characters. So you have to move all your characters from the start all the way to the exit, or you can take out all the enemies on the screen. That's your main objective to continue on. But there is hostages that you have to pick up, and these hostages are the characters that you can unlock. But you have to make sure that you pick them up and then take them to the other side before you clear up all the enemies. Because if you win by taking out all the enemies but you don't end up picking up the hostages, then you just move on without them, which does kinda suck. But if you're playing on hard mode, you actually start out with all 20 characters. Yes, there's actually 20 characters that you can play as in this game. So you'd think that would make things much more easier, but here's the catch though. If you die as one of them, they're gone for good, and you can't pick up other hostages along the way. So that's why it's on hard mode. And like I said before, this is like a strategy game, so you really gotta be careful with your movements and the characters that you use on each stage, because they all have unique abilities. Like some can throw bombs, some can just like shoot up directly, or throw objects that can hit enemies at a higher place, and even various amounts of magic attacks. Yes, this game is actually pretty over the top. And I guess I should go through some of the characters right now. So you have a guy with a gun that looks like Han Solo, and then you got some guy with a bazooka, an Amazonian guy with a spear, a medieval knight, a Viking, a samurai that shoots tornadoes, and lastly I'll mention is M. Bison using a flamethrower. Yeah, that happened. And there's plenty of other characters that I didn't mention, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of variety of craziness in this game. And the Genesis version of this game has 50 levels, so there's a lot of different levels within this game. So some of the settings in this game are the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, Ancient China, Present Day, and finally, Future. And after every few stages you have to fight a boss at the end, and then you get to go on to the next setting. So the game is very simple to understand, but man, is it hard. Because this is not the kind of game where you want to just run in and just blow everything up, because you really gotta take your time. Yeah, in some of the earlier stages you can just run up and just kill everything, but then there are some stages where you gotta take it slow and just be careful. And try and take over the situation as quickly as possible, because there is a time limit, but the time limit is pretty long in this game, or at least it feels pretty long, so it's not that much of an issue. And there's a 2-player mode, so you can play this game with co-op, which is pretty awesome. So that's all I have to say about the gameplay. It's an easy game to understand, especially for a strategy game, but it is hard to master. So now, let's take a look at the game's controls, and I'd say they're pretty good. So moving around is very easy and responsive. Now yes, the walking in the game is pretty slow, but because this is a pretty slow-paced game, it does work rather fine, and at least there are differences between walking around with a guy with a bazooka and walking around with a guy with like a gun. But even when you're using the lighter weapon characters, they still walk very slow, but at least it is very responsive. And even some of the enemies walk slow, so that's not an issue at all. And as for the shooting, that's also very easy to understand and also works quite well. So, you know, one button shoots your regular weapon and then the other one shoots your special weapon. Although one complaint I do have is that with your special weapon, sometimes the hit detection can be a little bit off. Especially with the bombs, because look at this for an example. Normally you'd think that this shot would have killed both of these guys, but actually it didn't kill any of them. I was at least expecting to kill one of them, but no, instead it just didn't hit any of them, so you really have to be right on the mark when you use this, which can be kind of annoying. But shooting with the regular weapon is fine considering that all the shots are really small, and all the targets are pretty big enough that I'd say that it is easy to hit those ones. But yeah, that's really my only complaint with the game is that the special weapons, they can be a little bit hard to get used to because of the hit detection. But it's definitely not something that breaks the game for me, considering that everything else is actually really good. So other than that, everything else is very easy to understand. So now, as for the game's graphics, I think the graphics are alright. So everything is really dark, which I think does look okay for the game that it's trying to be, considering that it is a war game. The enemies on the field look okay, some of them are pretty funny looking though, and the character portraits do look pretty good. And as for their character designs when you're using them on the field, they do match up quite well. So there's nothing really bad I can say about the graphics, I think they look fine the way they are, but obviously this is not as good as the arcade version. But for an early Genesis game, I find the graphics do look fine the way they are. So no real complaints here. So now, as for the game's music, I actually like it quite a bit. Mostly because I find some of the songs to be really catchy, and it does suit the game pretty well. But probably my favorite song within the game would have to be the song in the medieval stage. I really like that one a lot. But other than that, I really don't have any complaints whatsoever. Sure, the song within the third stage is kind of boring sounding, but other than that, all the other songs in the game are great. And it does have a pretty nice sound to it, so no complaints whatsoever. Now before we move on, one thing I would like to talk about is the box art for this game, and all I have to say is that it's pretty damn badass. So there's a lot of shit going on, like a samurai guy in the middle, Phoenix from X-Men, M. Bison with a chain gun this time, a beast with a laser gun, robots, and even the Death Star shooting lasers, so yeah, if you ask me, I really like this cover a lot, it's awesome. Even the Mega Drive cover for this game is pretty awesome looking too. So you got a sword with some nice detail on it, some lightning in the background, castle walls with soldiers and demons inside, and there's just a whole lot of other things going on, so yeah, no matter which cover you're looking at, I think both of them look awesome. Now obviously I'm not judging this game by its cover, even though I'm already talking about the game itself, but I just really wanted to say that I really like this cover art, I think it's badass as fuck. So now, if you want to buy this game, the game's general price range is usually about $25 to $35 for a loose copy, but as for a box copy, that usually goes for like $45 to $50, sometimes a little bit more, but usually between like $45 and $50. At least from what I've looked up, and I've never seen this game in the wild before, or at least I assume I've never seen it before. Considering that I've only heard about it recently, I mean, there's a good chance I might have seen it before, but just knew nothing about it. But as far as I can remember, I don't think I've ever seen it before. But I do know one thing, is that a lot of the games that were published by Renovations can be a little bit tough to come by at times. And some of the other versions are also kinda tough to find, considering that some of them didn't even come out in North America. Like the Master System one is only in PAL, the PS2 remake one is only in Japan, the PC Engine one is also only in Japan, but that's to be expected. And if you can find an arcade cabinet of this game, well, good luck. And honestly, if you just want to play the arcade version, just use MAME. It just makes life so much easier, and I don't mind that one bit. So now, if I were to rate this game, I'm gonna have to give it an 8 out of 10. So personally, I consider this to be a great strategy action game, and this version of the game plays very well, I find. And as I said before, the only real complaint I have with this game is the hit detection on the special weapons, but other than that, I find this game plays really well, and I find it to be really fun. Also, it can be really addicting. And I just love the whole idea of the game, especially the fact that you can play as like samurais mixed with knights, mixed with like and bisons with flamethrowers and shit. I just love that. I think just over the top games like this are awesome. Well, for the idea of the game, I think it's awesome, but if it plays great, then that's even better. And this one, yeah, I definitely say this one does play really great. And I also find it to be one of Sega's underrated games that they developed, mostly because I barely hear anyone ever talk about this game. And maybe one day, although this is just wishful thinking, Sega will do another remake for this game, because I think this is a really good game that should definitely be explored more. But as I said, that's just wishful thinking, because I highly doubt Sega will do anything like that awesome again. and if they did, well, it would be a miracle. So with that being said, this is a really fun, over-the-top strategy action game that I just really enjoy myself, and I definitely recommend you to go check it out. So that'll be the end of this review, so thanks for watching and commenting.